And in our non-stop continuous coverage coming in from Ukraine, 29 days of relentless Russian attacks. Russia continues to now up the offensive against Ukraine, which means more bloodbath on the streets of Ukrainian cities. City of Mariupol has been devastated. There are parts of the city which have turned into ghost towns after multiple shellings have reduced buildings that existed 1 month ago now to complete debris and rubble. A massive explosion was reported from the Ukrainian port Berdyansk. Also, black smoke engulfed the port, and according to reports emerging, one warehouse with ammunition and fuel was destroyed. Reports suggest that a Russian ship sank and 2 others were on fire while trying to escape. The city of Chernihiv, for example, also paints a picture of devastation. Broken buildings, smoke emerging from houses. The city of Kharkiv that faced massive shelling and attacks from all corners now have charred buildings and commercial establishments showing significant damage. But Ukraine says there's still a valiant fight back that continues. Ukraine claims over 12,000 Russian soldiers are in and around the Kyiv region, out of which 3,000 soldiers are almost surrounded, whereas 4,000 soldiers have been cut off. And with an info war also that's on, Russia has now released a hair-raising video. This is of striking a shopping center in the capital city, Kyiv. Now, the Kyiv shopping center was attacked late Sunday, killing at least 8 people and leaving dozens injured. Moscow is alleging that the shopping center was being used by Kyiv to store rockets and run its military operations. Moscow is claiming that to have used high-precision long-range weapons to strike the shopping center. Take a look at this video on your screen showing exactly how the target was attacked. The video released by Russia shows tracking and live monitoring of a vehicle and then targeting it after entering into the shopping mall. And just about a short while ago, India Today spoke to the deputy head of Sputnik News, Tatiana Kukareva, on the drone video released by Russia. Listen in. We've been in the past also seeing how drones, whether it's the kamikaze drones or others, that are literally a drone suicide mission that are being used. So that both by Ukraine and Russia, this appears, as we are talking about, is Russia releasing this drone video and saying that we were able to, the Russian drone able to track, target and destroy. How do you think the drones are now being used with 29 days of right now the war that is on in Ukraine? Tatiana.
Well, there are several types of drones that have been used in this operation on both sides, because you know that Ukraine had a shipment of drones delivered. We're talking about the Turkish drones. They're quite deadly, actually. You know, it's a larger debate, I think, you know, when drones are involved, because obviously it kind of makes the side that's using the drone gain in terms of there's no loss of life on its side. So it's not a, you know, it's not a plane that you can down. And if you down a drone, then the pilot is obviously unharmed. There have been videos. They've released them not just this week. That we've seen a lot of videos of drones. I think it's a very nice. It also gives a nice kind of perspective, because when it's a drone involved, you always see what it's hitting. So you can see that those are military targets. And when it comes to the drone videos that were coming out of the Russian Defense Ministry, I think that's what we're talking about here. You know, you can always see what they're actually hitting and where the target is, and that, again, that those are not civilian targets. And I think that's quite important in terms of, you know, trying to counter that,
yes,
that nuclear war that you mentioned.
Russian President Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in the early hours of 24 February, sparking the biggest war on a European state since World War II. And in the month since the invasion began, more than 10 million people have been displaced. Several Ukrainian towns and cities have been besieged and bombarded beyond recognition anymore. Hundreds of civilians, remember, have been killed, while thousands of them have already fled Ukraine into neighboring nations. And now they are bracing for a second month of bombing, destruction and death in Ukraine.
I decided to conduct a special military operation. It aims to protect people who have been bullied and subjected to genocide by Kyiv regime for 8 years.
It all started with an early morning broadcast that stunned the world. The future of millions of Ukrainians changed with the blink of an eye. Now, a month and counting, Ukraine has survived ruthless bombing, brutal attacks, and endless hellscape. Russian forces are struggling to capture key Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv and Kharkiv. Kyiv still stands firm. Heavily outnumbered and outmuscled, yet Ukraine is giving them a bloody nose.
I thank everyone who acts in support of Ukraine, in support of freedom, but the war continues. The acts of terror against peaceful people go on. 1 month already. That's long. It breaks my heart, hearts of all Ukrainians and every free person on the planet.
The war has spared no one. Toddlers, kids, youngsters, elderly, all victims. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, over 10 million people have fled their homes, mostly women and children. With each passing hour, Ukraine war is fast becoming the fastest growing humanitarian crisis Europe has seen since the Second World War. Diplomatic efforts are on to secure a ceasefire, and yet reports of civilian deaths in Ukrainian cities continue to make headlines. Once a bustling, lively and colorful country, many Ukrainian cities are becoming ghost towns. Bureau Report, India Today.
Remember, today is a very big day, specifically because US President Joe Biden is on a 4-day trip to Europe, and that while the Russian hostility is still on in Ukraine, which means today will be a big show of Western unity by military, economic and diplomatic powers. The crucial NATO summit has begun in Brussels in Belgium. All eyes are now on Biden's address. The US President will attend, very important, NATO, G7 and European Union summits. He's also expected to impose new and stricter sanctions against Russia. Now, the Western nations will likely warn the Russian President Vladimir Putin directly that his country will pay a ruinous cost for invading Ukraine during an unprecedented one-day trip of all these 3 summits. It will be a hectic day of summitry to maintain Western unity, kicking off at the Transatlantic Defense Alliance's headquarters in Brussels, where leaders will agree to ramp up military forces on Europe's East NATO and likely agree to send Kyiv equipment now to defend against biological, chemical and nuclear attacks. The resolve to punish Moscow with massive sanctions will be underlined by an emergency meeting of the G7 advanced economies, including Japan. And with this threat of an all-out war in Europe escalating, the United States of America has already stationed its troops closer to the Ukrainian border. India today, the only team to visit Morke in county, which is barely 50 kilometers from Ukraine, where India today saw American troops, Humvees, armored carriers and radar systems being deployed. Here's our exclusive report by our senior executive editor, Gaurav Sawant, now in Poland.
The military tents that you see behind me are the new American camps that have come up. We are about 300 kilometers from Poland's capital, Warsaw. We are currently in a place called Mokre Jamosh. This is an airfield. And if you notice in this airfield, there are a number of tents that have come up. These tents are the new American airbase that's been set up in Poland. Now, there are a large number of American troops who are now deployed in this area. Now, if you look just behind me there, that entire green cover are American military tents. They have American military hardware, from armored personnel carriers to Humvees to certain radars that have been set up to troop carriers that have come up in this area. And they've come up from mid-March to now, and the numbers are increasing. This is an airfield. That's the airfield. This is the Mokre Jamosh airfield. This is barely 50 kilometers from Ukraine's border. And civilian movement in this area is now restricted. This entire area is not only barricaded, but you have American troops deployed at every entrance to this airfield. Now, are these American troops here as part of a North Atlantic Treaty Organization country, NATO military exercise? They started coming here. The initial troops or the pioneers came in between mid to end February, and the larger number of troops are still coming in. We spoke to some of these soldiers, but they said they're not cleared to speak to media about the nature of the deployment or the duration of the deployment in Poland, close to the border with Ukraine. But there are radars that are here, there are Humvees that are here, and there are certain other military hardware that is coming in to this area, is what locals tell India today. US President Joe Biden is also to fly in to Warsaw for talks with Poland. Now, while that is a lot to do also with humanitarian assistance that will be provided to Poland for Poland looking after more than 2 million refugees who've come in from Ukraine. But Poland is also looking for additional military hardware, from surface to air missiles to fighter jets from the United States, and more troops.
Now, the Russian aggression in Ukraine continues unabated even after a month. Ukraine has been resilient in its defense, but the world that was initially a fence-sitter, now as Putin's army is marching on, other countries also have started to pull together a joint military aid to arm Ukraine in its defense and to fight for its freedom. Take a look at this report.
Yet a country with just 2 lakh active military personnel has been able to stand up to a behemoth Russian army that has sophisticated weaponry at its command. A large part of that fierce resistance comes from the swift transfer of military equipment by NATO and other allied countries. In a first, the 27-country bloc of the European Union signed off a $551 million package to help arm Ukraine. Germany has rewritten its long-standing policy that barred exporting weapons into war zones. Germany sent 1,000 anti-tank weapons, 500 Stinger anti-craft defense systems to Ukraine. Within days of the invasion, France reportedly promised to send military aid to Ukraine, but there's no publicly disclosed specifics of it. The United Kingdom has so far sent 2,000 short-range and anti-tank missiles, Saxon armored vehicles, and Sky Sabre air defense system with 100 military operators. The US so far has been the largest contributor, with 1,400 Stinger anti-aircraft missile systems, 4,600 Javelin anti-tank missiles, 5 Mi-17 helicopters, 3 patrol boats, 4 counter-artillery and counter-drone tracking radars, 2,000 light anti-armor weapons, 300 grenade launchers and ammunition. They've also sent 600 shotguns and 600 machine guns, 5,000 rifles, 1,000 pistols, 25,000 sets of body armor, 25,000 helmets. The US has so far sent nearly 40 million rounds of small arms ammunition, over 1 million grenades, mortar and artillery rounds, along with 70 Humvees and other vehicles, 6,000 at 4 anti-armor systems and 1,000 switchable drones. Canada has sent nearly 4,500 M72 rocket launchers, 1,600 fragmentation vests, nearly 7,500 hand grenades. Other than that, it has also contributed $1 million to buy commercial satellite high-resolution and modern imagery, machine guns, pistols and carbines. Canada has sent 1.5 million rounds of ammunition, sniper rifles and various related equipment worth $7.9 million to Ukraine so far. It has also contributed $19.9 million in military aid that could include helmets, body armor, gas masks and night vision gears. From Asia, Japan has sent bulletproof vests and helmets to Ukraine, and South Korea too has contributed to the war effort. The next-door neighbor for both Russia and Ukraine, Poland has reportedly contributed tens of thousands of shells and artillery ammunition, anti-aircraft missiles, light mortars and reconnaissance drones. All three Baltic and Scandinavian countries too have contributed with military aid to arm Ukraine, as has other European countries. Australia and New Zealand have come with major military donations for Ukraine. But for now, all this help from around the world has not been able to convince Putin's army to back down. The war continues and destruction abounds.
Now remember, it appeared for now it could just be between Russia and Ukraine. With Russia's invasion entering now a month, the war actually now triggers fear of a global conflict. NATO plays a silent spectator for now, rejecting even a no-fly zone demand of Ukraine. So the United States of America, Europe are now just imposing sanctions. Here's a report to help decode the ghost of another world war. Take a look at this report.
The war in Ukraine is now a month old and counting. But not for a moment has this been just Ukraine's fight. From the very beginning of the invasion, it has had all the tremors of the global conflict. Those leading the crisis themselves warn that World War III could be ahead. Russia first triggered the ghost of a global war by placing its nuclear weapons on high alert in February, following the move with a warning that World War III would have to be nuclear and destructive.
Всем понятно, что Третья мировая может быть только ядерной. Но, обращаю ваше внимание,
everybody understands that World War III can only be nuclear. It is in the heads of the Western politicians that nuclear war is always revolving and not in the heads of the Russians.
что мы не позволим.
That is why I assure you that we will not allow any provocations to force us out of the balance. But if a real war against us starts developing, those who carry out such plans must have a think.
Реальную войну, ну, это, наверное, должны думать об этом те, кто такие планы вынашивает, а они...
Amidst Ukraine's sustained pleas for NATO to impose a no-fly zone over the invaded nation, Russia raised the spectre again, warning that any such move could trigger a third world war. And that's probably the reason why, despite vehemently condemning Russia, the US or the European Union have rejected Zelensky's demand to declare Ukraine's airspace a no-fly zone.
We want
to close the airspace because our children are being deliberately killed. Missiles, bombs, jets are flying from the territory of Belarus and Russia.
Any move in this direction will be viewed by us as a participation in the armed conflict of whichever side whose territory will pose a threat to our service members. That very second, we will view them as participants of the military conflict, and it would not matter what members they are.
Wars were fought in Iraq, Syria, and also between two of the biggest nations, China and India. But never before did the risk of World War III looked as serious as it does now amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine. On a military scale, Russia's Ukraine war is limited. Yet the risk of World War III is bigger than ever and could just be a trigger away. Till now, Europe or America have refrained from sending troops to fight against Russia, limiting their response to sanctions and military aid. So why is the ghost of another world war so strong? World War is the name given to two multilateral wars that were essentially European, The First World War, fought during 1914 to 19, mainly involved Germany, Austria-Hungary and Turkey against the Allies, France, the UK, Soviet Russia, Italy, Japan, and from 1917, the United States. The Second World War, fought between 1939 to 1945, mainly involved Germany, Italy and Japan against France, UK, US and Soviet Russia. As the stakes pile up, as the pressure builds, and as the implications mount for Europe, the Russia-Ukraine war has the potential for a bigger war, both in weaponry and geography. Will NATO be pushed to impose a no-fly zone? And is that the one move separating the world from World War III? Bureau Report, India Today.
The war in Ukraine has not only laid waste the region over which it is being fought, it is also now going to have a ranging impact on different parts and functions across the world. Now remember, this is possibly one of the drawbacks of an interconnected existence that is life now in 21st century. India, just about 5,000 kilometers away from the scene of battle, has not had the distance guarantee insinuation from the impact of war. The economy of the country under strain, not only for what is happening there, but because of who the opposing sides are. And of course, the economic ties individually and collectively that they share with India. This is an important report. Take a look.
Hear this sound. Hear this sound. This is Mariupol. This sounds like very intense artillery pounding. This in a way could well be Grad multiple barrel rocket launchers going one after the other. Zoom, 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 zoom.
On March 8th, US President Joe Biden raised the ante by announcing a ban on the import of Russian energy products.
We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine.
Over the days of the war, the price of crude has fluctuated, but it has mainly been going north, adding to India's challenges. And that is because India has to import 80% of its total fuel needs. It is estimated that India buys around 2% of its total crude oil requirements from Russia. The figures for the 10 months from April 2021 to January 2022 indicate that India imported some $2 billion worth of oil from Russia in that period. Now, with Russia facing sanctions and restricted from selling oil to most of the world, India has gone ahead and signed a deal to import 3 million barrels of crude. While this would increase the Russian share in overall imports, the price at which the deal was struck is not yet known. The speculation, however, is that Russia offered what is called a steep discount on the prevailing rates, something which would be beneficial to India under the current circumstances.